So, hello and welcome back to the second presentation of the day in today's TCOM Technology Day. My name is still Anton Born and I'll be moderating this presentation for you. And this next presentation is going to take a closer look at AI, artificial intelligence. And I'm very excited to welcome our next speakers, Joe Gelb and Keren Brown from Zoomin Software to our virtual stage. So Joe is the co-founder and president of Zoomin, if I'm not mistaken, and he's been quite instrumental in the development of dynamic content delivery solutions for many years. And before establishing the Zoomin and Suite solutions, he played a vital role in designing and implementing documentation and structured content projects for a diverse variety of industry in everything from aerospace, defense, manufacturing, and of course, Israel being a high-tech country, also in the high-tech sector. And Joe is being joined today by his colleague, Keren Brown. And Keren currently holds the position of VP of Value and Enablement at Zoomin Software. Pretty cool title, I must say, where she also leads the sales enablement teams, customer value and education, as well as the marketing division. And in her prior roles, Keren served as a business development manager at Amazon Web Services, focusing on cloud adoption and sales growth. And during her time before that at Riskified, she was also the global head of learning and development, which I think is quite awesome, and a corporate sales trainer. So at Zoomin nowadays, though, she helps technical documentation managers articulate and measure the value of the technical documentation to the upper management, and she helps them implement GPT solutions for their own knowledge portals. So with that wealth of experience, I think that makes Joe and Keren really the perfect duo to highlight some of the challenges and opportunities that we all have in AI and self-service applications. So coming live to us from Israel, please join me in welcoming Joe Gelb and Keren Brown for the presentation, One Giant Step for TCOM, Lessons Learned from the Front Lines of the AI Revolution. Joe, Keren?
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks, Anton. Thanks for the great introduction. And we're looking forward to the conversation. Keren, it's always wonderful to talk to you.
Yeah.
And thanks for joining me on this webinar and this presentation to our audience. So I'd like to start off about a little bit about AI and how that's kind of an outgrowth of what we've been doing up until now as technical documentation practitioners. And I think we've been hearing a lot about AI, and it's really transforming a lot of what we're doing. It's transforming the way we're authoring content. It's transforming the way that we manage content and translate content and review content. We're seeing AI applications starting to help us in those realms. We see AI is helping us to publish content, which we're going to be talking about to some extent today, and as well as content analytics. These are things that we're used to doing today. I think a lot of us in this webinar that are listening are, that's what we're doing most of the time. We're authoring, we're publishing content, hopefully creating, getting good data about how people are using our content. And all this is really in order to create better customer service experiences. That's really what our content is there for. So the question is really, how can we be improving these customer experiences, these customer service experiences through AI? So in the beginning of the year, when the AI wave was starting to take over, and we were all kind of jumping on that AI bandwagon, so we published a white paper with predictions, which you can feel free to download. I think it was pretty interesting. I think it's very interesting to see what we were thinking about towards the beginning of the year and what's actually has come to fruition. A lot of it has. But I think one of the interesting things that we learned over the past several months is that, we hear a lot about a lot of organizations, enterprises, which are investing heavily in AI. And the question is, like, what is the focus? Like, what are they mostly thinking about to use AI for? And what I think is really interesting is that the number one priority for AI investment through large enterprises and really many product and service companies are really all around improving the customer service experience. And really, that's for us in this conference, in this webinar, I think is really interesting, because really the focus that most of our companies are thinking about is based on our profession, the content that we are working with all the time, that we're busy creating, and the value that the content that we're creating is actually being validated, I think, in a large way by the investment that's going in order to make that content even more performant, more effective. So I think that's really very interesting for all of us, and merely makes us more necessary for us to kind of pay attention to where the world is going with AI, how that can help us and help our profession, but also help us to articulate to our management ideas for how our content could be more effective using AI, and really having a seat at that table when companies are thinking about how to better use AI. And us as content practitioners, content owners, really need to be at the forefront of those discussions. A lot of the content that we're working with today is technical documentation with various tools and formats and repositories. A lot of us are using API documentation as well. But more and more, in order to create and provide better customer service experiences, we need to be thinking about other content that's being created in our organization. Learning content, other help content, knowledge articles being created by our support department, knowledge management people, community discussions, all kinds of content that's was very useful in order to help people do their jobs and to serve people and their customers and make them successful, really needs to be thought about and considered when we're thinking about rolling out AI solutions. So when we talk about bringing this content together to be providing effective AI solutions, we're talking about aggregating this content to have like one source of truth for all content governance, and being able to have API first mechanisms. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. Keren's going to be sharing some of her experiences, but that allows us to bring all this content into knowledge platforms, into product assistance, support sites, and also for our support people to be able to use this content and use AI in order to have better content experiences and better content service and better customer service. So really, all these applications that we've been using, they're more and more turning into AI applications, or at least AI-enabled applications. And really what we're seeing is that really any enterprise application these days, including for customer service, really needs to become an AI application in some extent. So that's the starting off point, the things where we're seeing things. And let's see a quick example of how AI can be used to provide better service. And then we're going to jump into some of Keren's experiences as well. So what I'm seeing here is an example of a documentation portal. Now, in the good old days, we had documentation portal, we had link, we had search, and people just navigated to find content, and that was just fine. But these days, people are expecting a little bit more. They're expecting to be able to ask a question and actually get some answers. So if I do a question and say, like, for example, this is all about storm clusters and architecture. If I want to say, like, what is a cluster anyway? Right? I should be able to have AI to look into the content and say, well, be able to answer my question based on who I am and what content I'm allowed to see, and what technical information, whether it comes from documentation or knowledge articles or learning content, how do I take all that content and be able to pull out the answer that's most relevant? So here I see some search results, but I also see on the right side how GPT was used in order to look through the content that I have access to and give me an answer. So let's say, well, very good. Now I know what a cluster is. Now let's see, I want to go ahead and maybe deploy a cluster and do a search. Okay, I want to deploy a new cluster here. And now I get some documentation that maybe one of you could have written this content. And I see a nice table of content and see a lot of content here. You know, this looks like a long procedure. Maybe I want to get a little summarization of what I need to do in order to deploy a cluster. I can actually use GPT to give me a summarization of this particular topic in my knowledge portal. This will give me a little bit of information to kind of set my stage of what I need to do. It's very interesting. Now I scroll down, I'm doing all these different steps. I see some code. Now I don't know about you guys, but it's been a long time since I did real programming. So let's say I want to go and explain this code. I can actually use GPT to explain to me what this code is doing, and maybe explain that to some of my colleagues and basically understand what this procedure is doing. Let me show the code. So this is another example of how GPT can help me to have a better user experience around this content. Great. Okay, great. So now as a customer, I was able to understand some background information much more easily. I was able to get a summarization of a longer piece of content, a longer procedure. I was able to to use GPT to explain to me things which are a little bit more difficult to understand. Let's say I'm an author. Okay, how can it help an author? Now, if I click over here, I'm actually logged into this portal, so the portal recognizes me as a content author. So if I click on this button, it's actually going to show me a little bit of information about how I can make this content a little bit more effective, maybe make this content a little bit better written. So this is another example of how I can use GPT from a customer experience point of view, from a searchability point of view, as well as helping to use it from an authoring point of view as well. And then taking this and combining it with analytics about what people are really looking for, what they're searching for, what questions are they asking, the ratings of this content, the feedback people are giving, it can really help me to give a much better view about the effectiveness of the content and how I'm able to make those content experiences better, how I'm able to make my GPT or my AI experience better, how I'm closing gaps in the content, et cetera. So we're going to dive into a little bit more about that, and I'm really excited to have Keren with me. Keren's really on the front lines of really implementing this for customers. So we'll go ahead and first of all, Keren, maybe you can share a little bit about the types of companies and that you're rolling out IT or AI for these days.
Sure. Thank you, Joe. So to be honest, the answer to the question who we've been working with is everyone. I think at this point, we've already implemented AI capabilities for dozens of companies, some of which you can see here on this slide. All verticals, all industries. We have SaaS companies, we have fintech companies, we have educational companies, we have manufacturing. I think every company in the world today, Joe, as you said, are developing applications, and these are now moving towards being AI applications. So it's really everyone, even companies that have gated content and do need, from a compliance perspective, to really pay attention to any security layers, already feel comfortable adopting AI. Of course, there's a lot of privacy issues that we resolve together to protect the data, but I don't think there's one company that that is left behind. And I have to say, every conversation that we start with any company, I ask them two questions. I ask them, why are you here? What is your interest behind getting AI capabilities? And I used to get two answers. Either they say, we need it because there's a buzz and everybody knows it, or we have to have it, meaning that we're already seeing our competition or our users demanding for it. But I think today, more and more companies are telling us we cannot be left behind, right? We can't be behind this. So I think right now, more and more companies are joining this, and yeah, it's everybody.
Great. Yeah, there's a lot of different, like you said, a lot of different verticals, a lot of different use cases. So let's say I'm a company, one of these logos or someone similar. What do I really need in order to get GPT ready?
Okay, so it sounds very simple. Sometimes it is, but let's go over all the main phases of the main stages. So first of all, AI applications are only as good as the content that they have. So today, enterprise knowledge must be fed into any AI applications that you have, whether you're building applications for customer service, as we saw. That's the main focus of CIOs and AI leaders today. But even if you're building applications for sales or for marketing or for HR, enterprise knowledge must be available for your applications, for your LLMs. And so making sure that you have one streamlined pipeline or content platform that consolidates all your knowledge in a way that is easy for your developers to connect to is critical. If you don't have that, if your content is scattered across different silos and different places in the company, this mission becomes very expensive and almost impossible, because you will have to have your AI application builders go and basically fetch for the content from wherever it is, and you don't know where it is, if it's updated, if it's consolidated. So a content governance layer is critical. The next thing, yeah.
Like going back to what we saw before with all those different formats, like I'm sure a lot of different companies are using different formats, XML, not XML, structured, not structured, web, not web. So being able to go and, wow, so you're saying being able to consolidate all this content from different repositories, different formats, different workflows, be able to consolidate this so that the AI layer can actually have a normalized view. Cool.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. Then once you have that content, as you mentioned, Joe, from the different schemas, different places, different authoring tools, all of it consolidated into one place, you have to make sure that you're compliant. You have to make sure that you keep the same security layers that your infosec or your legal or you as well want to keep with AI capabilities. And that usually means that users will only see content with GPT, with AI. They will only be exposed to content that they're supposed to see, and vice versa, that they're not exposed to content that they're not supposed to see. And of course, anything related to privacy and private information, all this needs to be in place when you're starting to build AI applications. And then the third thing is actually bring the actual capability themselves. So we just saw, Joe, you just demoed some of the capabilities on Storm. There are more and more capabilities that are being added into our industry, the documentation industry, but also, obviously for any other applications that are being built. And that's pretty much the process. So get your content in one place, make sure it's fully consolidated, make sure you have governance, security, and compliance all set in place, and then bring the actual capability for your users to consume the content with AI capabilities.
Got it. That's interesting. So basically the GPT capability anywhere means that, like we showed an example of the portal, but that allows us to put GPT actually inside of our support portal or inside of our applications actually, or inside of our self-service or even for agents.
Exactly, exactly.
So what does success look like? You've rolled this out to a number of different companies. How did this work? Did it not work? How effective is it? Can you walk us through a little bit about what success looks like and how can you actually measure that?
Yeah, absolutely. So before we maybe dive into the specific KPIs that we are very carefully monitoring, I have to say that the first thing that the companies that I've worked with, the first thing that they count as success is the fact that they're actually paving the way for others to adopt AI, and that's not that is not to be taken for granted. So the fact that today, some companies have AI boards, for example, or AI task force, and some of our, immediate context documentation leaders, they're part of this roundtables, they're part of AI conversations, and they're actually able to raise their hand and say, hey, I've got this first. So that is a huge success, I think, in our industry. But diving into the actual KPIs and what we measure. So I would probably say we are looking at three things. First of all, we want to make sure that GPT or the AI capability are performing to our satisfaction. And when we say performing, usually we talk about two things. We talk about coverage, meaning out of all the queries that we've just put into the search box or all the topic summary that we've asked GPT to bring us, how much answers or responses we got back. So that's coverage. The second thing is accuracy. So obviously with everything that we are getting back, whether it's an answer to a question, a topic summary, an explanation to a code, we want it to be the right one. We want it to be accurate. So we're also tracking accuracy. And there's also ways for us to work with our GPT models to make sure that we are balancing coverage and accuracy to the maximum. So you can see here some examples of how we're tracking this. This is specifically within the Zoomin analytics. So our customers that are using GPT have this built into the product. And we are also want to make sure, obviously, that there's an adoption to this. So let's assume that we talked about the steps that it takes to bring GPT capabilities. Let's say that you brought them, but now you need to do some user education so people will actually use it. And we also have ways to see how many of the total searches, for example, people perform are GPT searches. That gives us a good indication of product adoption. How many questions are being asked, what kind of questions, and so on and so forth. So user education and actually adopting those features is definitely something that we are tracking. And I think last but not least, you mentioned in your first slide, Joe, this is all for our users, right? This is all for better user experience, for better content consumption. And so how users interact with AI capabilities is a critical thing to look at. So we look at very granular things. For example, how many queries got a response? What was this response? And we work together with documentation teams to make sure that if we see any content-related issues, we address them immediately. Sometimes, to be honest, not by intention, by default, but GPT is a great QA for content because you're able to see if you need to make any modifications to your search or to the way that you tag or your taxonomy and so on and so forth. We definitely look at queries or questions that don't get a response and what happened there. We want to make sure people don't have a bad experience with these capabilities. And of course, we have different ways to gather feedback. So users have the ability to actually share feedback on the answers that they got. It could be a thumbs up, thumbs down. It could be a written feedback that the documentation teams are getting immediately. So we also have a way to track, what people think about our content and what people think about our AIs. So to sum up everything, we're looking at how GPT is performing, we're looking at the adoption rate, and we're looking at how happy we made our users with user experience.
Well, we've been talking, we talk a lot about search analytics, and now you're talking about GPT analytics. I presume it's a big difference to getting, seeing like people are searching for as opposed to what people are asking. It's a difference, right? And I think it's helping documentation teams to get even a finer tune idea about what are the questions people are asking, what people are having really issues with, and finding those gaps and covering them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say that we are also, we're helping our users with that. So we also have a way to put disclaimers or pop-up windows on the actual application to help users, guide their way through, how to ask a GPT question, or how to modify the question in a way that will help them get the answer. Obviously, you want it to be intuitive, and you can see here from the coverage and accuracy, and we're seeing this kind of numbers across the board. It is pretty intuitive. People do know how to use it, but we also want to help them. Not everybody's an early adopter. Some people are mid and late stage adopters. So we want to make sure that it's as comfortable and as self-serviced as possible for them to use those capabilities.
Very nice. So let's maybe back up a little bit and say, like, what if a company wants to go and implement GPT inside their information or their content experience? What would be a journey? What would be the steps that people would go through?
So it's not that complicated. We've implemented GPT for some companies in 3 weeks. I don't think it took us any longer than 8 weeks. The first obviously phase is to introduce the capabilities, right? To make sure that everybody who needs to know about this is aware of the capabilities. And usually we also work with the legal teams or the InfoSec team to get legal approval to use AI, to use GPT. And once we have that, we're basically setting up a user testing environment. And then we move to the second phase. The second phase is actually to internally check all those KPIs that I just mentioned through sample questions, sample queries. So we're looking at accuracy, we're looking at coverage. We want to make sure that any related content or search performance issues, are right in place. And then usually there's a phase of internal testing where internal employees actually test the AI capabilities. So that probably takes about a week. And then once we are behind the testing phase and we are seeing that all the KPIs meet the required demands, there are some modifications that we can do on the interface, on the front end, in terms of any language or any disclaimers. And even marketing aspects that you'd like to have once you kick this off and you open it up to the world. But then we move to stage 3, which is basically going live and enabling the GPT for all your users to start using. That's general availability. We don't have stage 4 because we're only talking about kicking off, but obviously stage 4 goes back to weekly monitoring adoption and performance.
Very good. So from your experience, how many customers are rolling this out with only public-facing content or also private content? Can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think at the beginning, we thought that the tendency will be to go with only public content because of the natural and natural concerns around GPT and privacy. But I think once we reassured everyone that the same privacy and the same security layers that you have right now with your documentation will just follow as is to the GPT experience. The gates were open, the gates for the ungated. And I think today, to be honest, I think today I'm working with more companies that have gated content or both public and gated content than just public content. So I'm very happy about that, because I think, even if your content is gated for whatever reason, you shouldn't be left, left behind this new experience. So.
That's interesting. Now, what's interesting about gated content is that it kind of opens up a door that it's not just typically, it's not just it's gated or not gated. Typically, content would be gated because am I a customer? Am I a partner? Am I a technician? If I'm a customer, did I purchase these particular devices or equipment or software, or did I purchase other ones? So I think what's interesting for this also from what I'm hearing you're saying is that if we open up to the ability to have gated content, we're also make it ability to say, well, if I log in and I have access to content for the products that I purchased, maybe, or based on my role, then the GPT is going to be giving me answers only based on content that I have access to, based on what I actually have purchased or my role.
Yeah. Absolutely. So the access management, this is what we call access management. It's the fact that it's not just about gated content, exactly as you said. It's also about seeing the content that your permissions allow you to see. And whether you're an admin or an employee or a partner or an implementer. So that's exactly right. And by the way, the GPT capabilities are also sensitive to any filters that you would put on the documentation. So if you just want to see, the AI capabilities performing on a specific product that you have, and you filter that product for yourselves, then the same AI experience will follow. So there's a lot of way that we are continuing what we call the personalization of content with AI capabilities, as we did with traditional search results.
Got it. So there's personalization as part of like the filtering. There's also personalization. I know we've talked in the past about using the personalization engine that we provide that allows any customer to go and say, well, I really prefer content, maybe user content as opposed to administration content, or troubleshooting content as opposed to maintenance content. And maybe I'm in a certain geographical location, or maybe I'm using a certain version of product as opposed to a different product. So all that basically bakes into the GPT as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly right.
Well, great. Okay. So if we boil it all down, what would be maybe 3 tips that you would share with our friends in the audience today?
Well, first of all, just do it.
Just do it. Okay.
I have to say, really, for again, all the companies that we've worked with, the fact that they pioneered, and some of them were really the first adopters to use AI within their organizations, has really positioned documentation in a completely different place. I mentioned before the fact that AI applications without consolidated knowledge are pretty much an empty box. So I think that positions, content writers, it positions documentation teams at a completely new place within the company. But again, pioneering that is really something that you should not be afraid of, but you should actually, pursue and spearhead. I want to talk a little bit about ensuring cross-functional alignment. So I mentioned before that every organization is looking at AI differently. Some have a main function that they build just to think about how to deploy AI across the entire organization. Some do this, not sporadically, but some just, allow different organization leaders to explore and see what's out there and implement it on their own without one function sort of organizing all the AI efforts across the company. But regardless of whether you have, an organized function for AI in your company, or that you're doing this, doing it yourself, you really want to bring all the relevant stakeholders to understand what it is that you're doing, and also see a demo, see what you're doing. It could be support leaders, legal, definitely everybody in the customer experience, customer service field, to just really align that this is what we are going to provide our users. And of course, in different stages in the process, they will also need to be brought into the picture. For example, legal and InfoSec are critical to that. And what I've seen is that when we work with legal from the very beginning, they see the demo, they see the capabilities, they understand the analytics, they understand what it is that we're doing here. So putting aside the fact that we have legal documents and everything needs to be organized and signed, just understanding the behind the scene and the behind of the technology is really a winning tip in my opinion. So I think that's the first one. Governance and accuracy are very, very important. We spoke about these as the main, I don't want to say main, but critical keys to success. We, as you saw, have our own analytics and our own testing methodology to make sure that we know how to track both coverage and accuracy. And we also, by now, since we've done this with so many companies, we're now also able to provide some benchmark and tell each and every one of you, here's how you performed, you're good to go and go live, or here's some, some work that you need to do on your content before you go live. But it's now, I feel we're in a different place in the industry where we have enough aggregated knowledge on what works and what not work. But defining exactly what we want to measure, exactly what success would be like, and then reverse engineering the entire testing process to meet those requirements is critical. We want to make sure that everybody is aligned on when we're ready for general availability. And then I think I mentioned that influencing your AI roadmap. I have to say again, endless times where the documentation leaders that we work with, they brought the VP of AI or head of machine learning to say, listen, we've been doing this, we've been implementing GPT for documentation, come take a look. And so it's the documentation leaders that brought the AI or the machine learning experts to actually see what's available. And we have been working in addition to providing AI for self-service applications. We've started to work with additional functions in the company, all due to the fact that we started with documentation applications. So I think leading the way, paving the way is something that you can definitely embrace here.
Very good. Yeah, and going back to the beginning of the conversation, and we're talking about AI, GPT readiness everywhere, or AI-based GPT. I think that really goes back to the beginning in the sense where once you have this common framework, which is all AI-based and the GPT is drawing from, so the portal that we were showing before that we've been talking to, that almost becomes like a quick start GPT functionality out there to customers you start getting experience with, but it really provides the infrastructure and the framework for other people in the company to build their own applications based on that framework. All the content is already aggregated, it's normalized, it's got metadata there, it's got the entitlements there, the authentication layers there, and then being able to use and build your own LLMs, your own database embeddings. So you can just basically use that same framework and build your own applications based on the frameworks. That's pretty. That's
a very critical point in terms of when you think about efficiency. Once the content is consolidated and you have it, it resides in one place, you can, you can bring your own LLMs, you can build your own applications, you can do pretty much whatever you want with this content already residing in this one place. So it's a developer's heaven.
Yeah, and it also allows all the writers, all the authors, the writers, the trainers, the engineers, everyone can keep using the tools that they're using, their same workflows, their same repositories. That all doesn't change, but it's just a matter of all the content gets aggregated and in a way that makes it much more accessible for the technology and for the user.
Zero change management from the way that you're doing your work right now. So yeah, absolutely.
Keren, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. And I'll be happy to open it up to any questions.